There comes a moment in every life when the mirror cracks, when the reflection staring back at you no longer feels like the person you've known. The goals that once gave you purpose now feel empty. The people you tried to please no longer fill the silence inside you. Something begins to whisper beneath the noise, a quiet truth that says you cannot keep living like this. This is the beginning of transformation, not the glamorous kind, but the painful, honest kind that strips away everything false so the real you can finally breathe. Rebuilding yourself isn't about escaping the past, it's about facing it. It's about standing in the ruins of who you used to be and choosing piece by piece to create someone new, not from perfection, but from truth. Most people fear this collapse, but what they call an ending is actually the soul's way of starting over. The journey of rebuilding is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you are beneath the noise, the expectations, and the pain. And once you begin, life will never be the same again. Because this time, you are not surviving, you are being reborn. The collapse of the old self is not an event of destruction, but an initiation into the deeper layers of existence. Most people spend their lives holding tightly to an image of who they think they are, a collection of habits, roles, and beliefs that once provided structure and identity. But there comes a moment when this structure begins to crumble. The life that once made sense begins to feel hollow. The routines that once provided stability begin to feel like chains. This collapse is not a punishment, it is a calling. It is the soul's way of saying that you have outgrown the version of yourself that once kept you safe. The old self is built from adaptation. It is who you became to survive, shaped by the expectations of parents, society, and the countless invisible forces that taught you what to be and what not to be. You learned early what behaviors were rewarded and what parts of you needed to stay hidden. Over time, you became a carefully curated version of yourself, functional, presentable, and predictable. Yet beneath that surface lives a restless silence, an awareness that something deeper is waiting to emerge. The collapse begins when the life built from adaptation no longer satisfies the life that longs for authenticity. The process rarely feels gentle. It often arrives as loss, heartbreak, failure, or disillusionment. Something tears through the illusions you've built, leaving you face to face with emptiness. People often describe it as a dark night of the soul, a time when everything familiar falls apart and nothing seems to make sense. What you are truly experiencing, however, is the dismantling of the old structure of meaning. You are being stripped of the illusions that once gave you security, so that you can build a foundation based on truth rather than imitation. The pain is not evidence that you are broken. It is proof that transformation is underway. During this phase, many try to rebuild too quickly. They rush to find a new identity, a new purpose, a new distraction. But to rebuild yourself authentically, you must allow the ruins to teach you. The old self does not vanish in a day. It lingers, resisting change, whispering doubts, urging you to return to comfort. Yet if you can resist the urge to escape, if you can sit quietly in the wreckage of what once was, something remarkable happens. You begin to see that the old self was never the enemy. It was a necessary stage, the shell that protected your inner growth until you were strong enough to shed it. To rebuild, you must first accept that collapse is sacred. It clears space for the new to emerge. It humbles you, reminding you that identity is not a possession, but a process. You are not losing yourself, you are discovering the layers beneath the masks. Every loss, every failure, every moment of disorientation becomes a teacher. You begin to see how much of your life was constructed from fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. The collapse exposes these fears and invites you to live beyond them. It asks you to rebuild not from what others expect, but from what your soul demands. In this space of uncertainty, the ego struggles. It wants control, clarity, and quick solutions. But the deeper work of self-reconstruction cannot be rushed. It unfolds like nature, in seasons, in cycles, in quiet moments of realization. Some days you will feel as though you are moving backward. Other days light will break through the cracks of your confusion. Each stage is necessary. Each feeling is part of the architecture of your becoming. You are not building a new self out of nothing. You are reclaiming the fragments of your forgotten essence and giving them form. Eventually you begin to notice that the collapse has changed you in subtle ways. The things that once defined you, achievements, possessions, approval, no longer hold the same power. You start to value truth over comfort, depth over certainty, solitude over noise. You stop seeking validation from the world because you are learning to validate yourself. What once felt like an ending begins to reveal itself as a beginning, a sacred initiation into authenticity. You realize that the old self was not destroyed, but transformed, absorbed into a deeper understanding of who you are. Rebuilding yourself is not about erasing the past, it's about honoring it while refusing to be confined by it. You integrate the lessons, release the illusions, and make peace with impermanence. The collapse of the old self gives birth to wisdom, the kind that cannot be taught, only lived. You emerge not as a perfect being, but as a whole one, flawed, aware, and deeply alive. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes the soil from which new meaning grows. Listen to the podcast for more on how to fully emerge from an unbearable affair. With the pain that once felt unbearable becomes the soil from which new meaning grows. So when life falls apart and you find yourself standing in the ruins of who you used to be, remember that this is the natural rhythm of growth. You are not ending, you are evolving. You are not being punished, you are being purified. Every collapse carries within it the blueprint for rebirth. The only way forward is through the fire of transformation, and on the other side of that fire you will find a stronger, freer, and truer version of yourself waiting to be born. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for having the courage to face the collapse, for it is the first step toward the beautiful reconstruction of your soul. Confronting the shadow is one of the most profound and terrifying steps in rebuilding yourself. It requires the courage to face the parts of you that you have denied, buried, or rejected. These are the emotions, impulses, and memories that you've been taught to hide. Anger, envy, fear, shame, selfishness, and pain. They do not disappear just because you ignore them. They live within you, influencing your thoughts, shaping your relationships, and directing your choices from behind the scenes. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the unacknowledged truth of who you are. Until you turn toward it, it remains the unseen force that rules your life in silence. Most people spend their lives avoiding their shadow. They project it onto others, blaming the world for what they refuse to confront in themselves. When they see arrogance, cruelty, or dishonesty in someone else, they react with outrage, not realizing that these reactions are often reflections of their own hidden traits. Every judgment you make reveals something about you. The things you despise most in others usually mirror the things you have not accepted in yourself. To confront the shadow is to withdraw these projections, to stop running from your reflection, and to look inward with honesty rather than shame. The moment you begin this work, resistance appears. The ego will fight to preserve its image of perfection. It will tell you that you are good, moral, kind, and pure, and that only others are flawed. But the truth is that every human being carries light and darkness within them. The shadow does not make you bad, it makes you complete. To deny it is to live half a life, trapped in a shallow version of yourself. The process of self-reconstruction demands integration, not denial. You must learn to hold your darkness with compassion, to understand where it comes from, and to transform it into strength rather than shame. The shadow is formed in childhood when you first learned what parts of you were unacceptable. If you were punished for being angry, you learned to suppress your anger. If you were ignored when you cried, you learned to hide your sadness. If you were only praised for being good, quiet, or obedient, you built your identity around those traits and exiled everything else. Over time, these repressed emotions sink into the unconscious, waiting for acknowledgement. They may appear in your dreams, your relationships, or your moments of stress, manifesting as patterns you can't seem to escape. The people who trigger you the most are often mirrors of your disowned self, sent by life to remind you of what still needs healing. To rebuild yourself, you must allow these hidden fragments to return to consciousness. This is not a comfortable process. It may involve admitting that you are capable of cruelty, selfishness, or manipulation. It may require facing the guilt of your past actions or the pain of your unresolved wounds. But through this confrontation, you begin to see that your darkness is not separate from your humanity. Anger can become the fuel for justice. Fear can transform into wisdom. Pain can deepen your empathy. The shadow contains the very energy that, once integrated, gives you depth, authenticity, and power. When you bring light to your shadow, you begin to understand yourself in a more complete way. You see how your flaws coexist with your virtues. You learn to forgive yourself for being human. This self-acceptance dissolves the internal war that has been draining your energy for years. You no longer need to perform goodness or hide imperfection, because you realize that both are part of your nature. This realization births inner peace, not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of wholeness. You become grounded, unshaken by judgment, because you are no longer hiding from yourself. As you continue to explore your shadow, you also begin to see the shadow of the world. You understand that societies, like individuals, repress what they fear. Cultures deny vulnerability, glorify success, and punish failure. Yet beneath these ideals, the collective shadow festers in the form of greed, violence, and disconnection. When you confront your own darkness, you stop contributing to this unconscious cycle. You become a conscious being capable of compassion rather than condemnation. You recognize that the battle between good and evil is not out there. It exists within every human heart. The only way to change the world is to first reconcile that battle within yourself. There is an ancient wisdom in darkness. The shadow teaches humility, patience, and truth. It reminds you that to heal is not to erase pain, but to understand it. It shows you that love without awareness of darkness is fragile, easily shattered by disappointment. But love that has faced the shadow becomes unbreakable. It knows the full range of human experience and still chooses compassion. This is the love that allows you to rebuild yourself authentically, not as an ideal, but as a real, imperfect being capable of both light and dark, creation and destruction, fear and courage. The journey through the shadow is the journey through truth. It is the descent into your own depths so that you can rise with integrity. Every emotion you've suppressed holds a lesson. Every flaw conceals a potential. The moment you face them without judgment, you begin to reclaim your power. You become whole again, no longer a collection of contradictions, but a living, breathing synthesis of all that you are. That is where true freedom begins. It is the freedom of self-acknowledge, the liberation that comes from no longer needing to pretend. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for having the strength to look within. The courage to confront your shadow is the courage to meet your true self. And from that meeting, a new life begins. The call of inner chaos is the moment when the structure of your familiar world begins to tremble, and something deep within you starts to awaken. It is the voice that whispers in the silence, telling you that the life you've been living is no longer aligned with who you truly are. Chaos appears when order becomes too rigid, when comfort becomes confinement, and when growth demands that you step beyond what is safe. Many fear this chaos, seeing it as destruction or failure, but it is in truth the birth cry of transformation. Chaos is not the enemy of order, it is the womb of renewal, the natural rhythm of creation tearing down what no longer serves so that something more authentic can emerge. Every meaningful change begins with disruption. When the structures of your identity start to fall apart, when certainty dissolves into confusion, you are being called to evolve. The routines and beliefs that once gave you stability now feel suffocating. Your heart begins to rebel against the predictable, and your soul refuses to settle for mediocrity. This rebellion within is not a sign of weakness, but of awakening. It means you have reached the edge of the person you used to be, and life is inviting you to take the leap into the unknown. The call of chaos is the call to growth, to surrender the illusion of control and trust the deeper intelligence of your becoming. The mind resists this process because it craves certainty. It wants clear answers, defined paths, and logical explanations. But chaos offers none of these things. It strips away the familiar patterns that once made you feel secure, leaving you standing in the emptiness of uncertainty. This is why many people run from it. They distract themselves, numb their discomfort, or cling to the past. Yet the more you resist chaos, the louder it becomes. It will find you in your restlessness, your discontent, your sleepless nights. It will whisper to you through the quiet dissatisfaction that no amount of success, validation, or pleasure can silence. The only way out is through. You must walk willingly into the storm, trusting that it will not destroy you, but reshape you. Chaos often arrives disguised as crisis. It may come as the loss of a job, a broken relationship, an illness, or a deep sense of meaninglessness. Life uses these moments to dismantle the false structures you've built around yourself. Everything that collapses during chaos was never truly stable to begin with. It only appeared that way because you were afraid to question it. When these illusions fall, you are left with nothing but truth. It is a raw and painful state, but also the most fertile ground for rebirth. In the darkness of chaos, your deepest potential begins to stir, waiting for you to listen. To answer the call of chaos, you must let go of the need to know what comes next. You must become comfortable with not having control. This surrender is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength. It means trusting the wisdom of life itself, recognizing that beneath the apparent disorder lies a deeper pattern. Just as nature moves through storms to restore balance, your soul moves through inner chaos to bring you closer to your authentic self. Every moment of confusion is shaping you in ways your mind cannot yet understand. What feels like falling apart is often life rearranging itself in your favor. Within chaos, creativity awakens. When the old order collapses, new possibilities are born. The chaos inside you is the space where the old identity dies and the new one begins to form. This is why artists, thinkers, and mystics have always found inspiration in turmoil, because chaos breaks the walls of limitation and forces the imagination to expand. You begin to see the world differently. You question what you once accepted blindly. You discover strength in your vulnerability and wisdom in your pain. Chaos burns away illusions, leaving behind only what is essential, what is real. The most powerful realizations often come in the stillness after the storm. When you stop fighting chaos and allow it to move through you, something inside settles. You begin to see that the storm was never outside of you. It was a mirror of the inner transformation taking place. The fear, the confusion, the anger, and the loss all become parts of a larger process of awakening. you start to recognize that life has always been guiding you, even when it felt merciless. Every fall, every detour, every period of chaos was necessary to bring you to this point of self-realization. In the end, inner chaos is not a curse, but a sacred teacher. It destroys illusions so that truth can emerge. It dismantles comfort so that courage can grow. It shakes you awake, forcing you to see what you have ignored and to honor the parts of yourself that have long been silenced. To rebuild yourself, you must first allow chaos to do its work, to strip you bare, to humble you, to break the walls around your heart. From that place of emptiness, you will begin to rebuild, not from fear or imitation, but from truth. You will rise not as the person you were, but as the person you were always meant to become. Good luck on your journey through the storm, and thank you for having the bravery to face your inner chaos. It is through this sacred disorder that you will find the clarity, strength, and authenticity your soul has been longing for. The power of solitude is one of the most misunderstood forces in personal transformation. In a world that constantly glorifies noise, activity, and connection, solitude is often mistaken for loneliness, but solitude is not isolation from life. It is intimacy with yourself. It is the space where the noise of the external world fades and the inner voice, long ignored, begins to speak again. It is in this sacred quiet that rebuilding yourself truly begins. For only when you are alone can you see yourself without distortion, without masks, and without the expectations of others shaping your reflection. Most people fear solitude because it strips away their distractions. They have built their identities through comparison, through the eyes, opinions, and validations of others. They rely on the rhythm of the outside world to tell them who they are and what they should be doing. When those sounds are gone, when the phone stops ringing and the room falls silent, they feel exposed. The silence becomes a mirror reflecting everything they've avoided: their insecurities, their regrets, their unmet desires, and their unhealed wounds. Yet this discomfort is not punishment, it is invitation. The loneliness you feel in solitude is simply the echo of the parts of you that you have abandoned. It is your soul asking to be seen again. In solitude, there is no one left to perform for. You can no longer hide behind social roles or public masks. You meet yourself in your rawest form, uncertain, imperfect, but real. The more you sit in this quiet space, the more layers begin to fall away. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by the need for approval. You begin to see how often you've sacrificed authenticity just to be accepted. Solitude teaches you to stop chasing validation and start cultivating presence. It replaces the hunger to be seen by others with a deeper need to see yourself clearly. This clarity is painful at first, but it is the foundation of self-reconstruction. The mind will resist solitude because it thrives on distraction. It fears silence because silence exposes truth. When you sit alone, your thoughts will rise like restless waves. Memories of the past, anxieties about the future, doubts about your worth. Many people try to escape this inner turbulence, turning to entertainment, relationships, or constant work to drown it out. But if you can stay still, if you can breathe through the discomfort and listen deeply, you will find something precious beneath the noise, a voice that is your own. This is the voice of intuition, the quiet guide that has always been with you but drowned under the world's chaos. In solitude, that voice becomes clear, steady, and trustworthy. True solitude is not about being cut off from others. It is about reconnecting with your essence. When you are constantly surrounded by people, your energy becomes fragmented. You pick up their moods, their beliefs, their fears. You begin to lose the boundary between what is yours and what belongs to others. Solitude gathers that scattered energy back into one place. It centers you. reminding you that your worth does not depend on your usefulness or your relationships, but simply on your existence. You learn to enjoy your own company, to find peace in your thoughts, and to draw strength from within rather than from the outside world. There is a profound transformation that happens when you stop fearing solitude and begin to embrace it as a teacher. The silence becomes not empty, but full of insight, creativity, and understanding. Many great discoveries, both scientific and spiritual, were born in moments of deep solitude. It is the fertile ground where ideas mature and self-awareness blossoms. When the world's voices fade, your imagination awakens. You begin to dream again, not the dreams imposed by society, but the ones whispered by your own heart. Solitude gives you the courage to hear those whispers and the strength to act on them. With time, solitude becomes your sanctuary, not your prison. It is the place you return to when life feels heavy, when decisions feel clouded, or when you've lost sight of your purpose. It teaches you the art of reflection, the ability to step back and see your life not as a collection of random events, but as a meaningful journey. In solitude, you learn to distinguish between the noise of fear and the signal of truth. You begin to understand that being alone does not mean being incomplete. It means being whole enough to stand on your own. When you rebuild yourself in solitude, you do not emerge detached from the world, but more connected to it. Because you have met your own depths, you can meet others with compassion instead of dependency. You no longer seek relationships to fill a void, but to share from abundance. Solitude purifies your intentions, heals your attachments, and prepares you to re-enter the world with authenticity and strength. It teaches you that silence is not emptiness, it is the birthplace of wisdom. So when life pulls you away from the crowd, when you find yourself walking alone through seasons of uncertainty, do not resist it. Do not rush to fill the quiet or escape the stillness. This is the sacred space where your soul is rebuilding its foundation. In solitude, you are not lost. You are returning home to yourself, and in that homecoming lies your greatest power. Good luck on your journey into the quiet, and thank you for having the courage to face the silence. It is within that stillness that you will rediscover your strength, your truth, and the unshakable peace of being whole. Integration. Over reinvention is the heart of genuine transformation. It means that rebuilding yourself is not about discarding who you were or trying to become someone completely new, but about reclaiming the forgotten pieces of your true self and uniting them into harmony. The modern world often glorifies reinvention, the idea that you can erase your past, change your name, your habits, your image, and start over as a different person. But this constant desire to reinvent is often rooted in shame, in the belief that who you are is not enough. True healing, however, does not come from running away from yourself. It comes from turning inward, gathering the fragmented parts of your identity and integrating them into a stronger and more authentic whole. Throughout life, you are shaped by experiences, relationships, and choices. Each one leaves an imprint, both light and dark. The joyful memories give you confidence, while the painful ones often leave behind wounds and doubts. When you try to reinvent yourself, you are often attempting to bury those wounds, to cover them up with new achievements or identities. But the parts of you that remain unhealed do not disappear. They wait in silence, influencing your actions and emotions until they are acknowledged. Integration asks something far deeper of you: to confront your pain, to understand it, and to give it meaning. You do not reject your past, you make peace with it. You take responsibility for it and allow it to become a foundation for your new strength. Integration is about wholeness. It is the process of gathering all your inner fragments, the confident and the broken, the kind and the bitter, the fearless and the frightened, and letting them coexist. Every part of you has something to teach. The moments of failure teach humility. The moments of anger teach compassion. When you begin to see that nothing within you is wasted, you stop trying to replace yourself and instead begin to rebuild from understanding. This shift marks the beginning of real growth. Reinvention focuses on image. Integration focuses on essence. Reinvention says, I must change who I am. Integration says, I must remember who I am beneath everything I've become. The ego often resists this process. It wants control, perfection, and recognition. It fears the vulnerability that comes with self-honesty. It wants to erase the past because facing it means admitting weakness, regret, and imperfection. But integration requires surrender. It asks you to lay down the armor you've built and look at yourself without judgment. This honesty can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is the key to freedom. When you stop pretending to be someone you're not, you begin to live with ease. The energy you once spent on maintaining false images becomes available for creativity, love, and inner peace. You discover that authenticity is not something you create. It's what remains when the layers of pretense fall away. Integration also means accepting contradictions within yourself. You can be strong and still feel afraid. You can be wise and still make mistakes. You can be loving and still carry anger. To be human is to hold opposites. When you stop trying to force yourself into one fixed identity, you allow space for complexity. This balance brings depth to your character and compassion to your relationships. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, success and failure, right and wrong, and instead begin to see the unity that connects everything. Life becomes less about perfection and more about truth. Reinvention keeps you in a cycle of escape, always running toward the next version of yourself, never resting long enough to truly know who you are. Integration, on the other hand, grounds you. It anchors you in self-awarenessness. It allows you to carry your past with wisdom instead of pain. You begin to realize that nothing was wasted. Not the heartbreaks, not the mistakes, not the disappointments. Every experience was preparing you to see yourself more clearly. When you integrate, you honor your journey. You take the raw materials of your life, the joy, the fear, the loss, and the triumph, and shape them into a meaningful whole. There is a quiet power in integration. It does not announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic changes. It unfolds subtly, in the way you begin to respond instead of react, in the way you start forgiving instead of resenting, in the way you trust yourself, even when the path ahead is uncertain. Integration makes you resilient because you are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer chasing an ideal. You have found peace in your imperfection, and from that peace comes unshakable strength. When you reach this place, you no longer need to prove yourself to the world. You understand that growth is not about becoming someone else, but about becoming whole. You have faced your past and turned it into wisdom. You have embraced your flaws and turned them into depth. You have accepted your pain and turned it into compassion. That is what it means to rebuild yourself, not as a new person, but as a complete one. The pieces that once made you feel broken are now the mosaic of your becoming, each one essential, each one beautiful in its own way. Good luck on your journey toward wholeness, and thank you for having the courage to integrate rather than escape. May you always remember that everything you have been, every shadow, every scar, every triumph, belongs to the masterpiece of who you are becoming. Becoming the architect of meaning is the final and most empowering stage of rebuilding yourself. It is the moment when you stop searching for purpose in the outside world and begin to create it from within. Most people live as though meaning is something waiting to be found, hidden in success, relationships, or recognition. They chase after it endlessly, believing that happiness lies just beyond the next achievement. But life does not hand you meaning ready-made. Meaning is something you build deliberately from the fragments of your experiences, your pain, your growth, and your truth. To become the architect of meaning is to take responsibility for your own narrative and to realize that you are both the designer and the inhabitant of your inner world. This transformation begins when you recognize that life by itself is neutral. Events happen, joy, loss, victory, and tragedy, but they do not carry meaning until you give them one. Two people can experience the same event and interpret it in completely different ways. One may see it as a curse, the other as a lesson. The difference lies not in the event itself, but in the consciousness interpreting it. But when you rebuild yourself, you learn to become conscious of this power, the ability to define what your experiences mean. Instead of letting life happen to you, you begin to participate in its creation. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me? What can I create from this?" Meaning is born in awareness. When you awaken to your own agency, you begin to see that everything in your life has been a part of a larger story, one that you are still writing. The suffering that once felt senseless begins to take shape as the foundation for wisdom. The mistakes you once regretted become stepping stones that led you toward clarity. You realize that you are not defined by what happened to you, but by the meaning you choose to give it. This shift in perception transforms pain into power. The same fire that once burned you becomes the light that guides you. Becoming the architect of meaning also means freeing yourself from borrowed beliefs. So much of what you think life should be comes from the conditioning of others, from society, family, religion, and culture. You were taught what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, and what kind of person you ought to become. But when you start to awaken, you realize that much of that meaning is second-hand, built on someone else's blueprint. You begin to see that your soul has its own design, unique, mysterious, and deeply personal. To follow that design, you must be willing to dismantle the false meanings you inherited and construct your own truth, even if it goes against what the world expects. This act of creation is not a single moment. It is a lifelong process. Every choice you make, every challenge you face, every perspective you adopt contributes to the architecture of your inner world. You become intentional about what you allow to shape you. You begin to see that meaning is not found in grand achievements, but in the quiet alignment between your values and your actions. It lives in the way you treat others, in the way you show up for yourself, and in the way you find beauty even in pain. When you create meaning consciously, you live with depth. You no longer drift through life waiting for something to give you direction. There is freedom in this realization, but also responsibility. To be the architect of meaning means to take ownership of your life fully, to stop blaming, to stop escaping, and to start building. It requires patience and honesty, because creating meaning is not about pretending everything is good. It is about facing reality exactly as it is and choosing how to respond. You may not control every event in your life, but you always control the story you tell about it. That story shapes your identity, your relationships, and your peace. Once you understand this, nothing that happens can truly destroy you, because you know how to rebuild meaning from the ruins. When you reach this level of awareness, you begin to live with purpose, even in uncertainty. You stop asking life to be easy and start asking it to be meaningful. You find fulfillment not in external validation, but in the inner satisfaction of knowing that you are creating something true, a life that reflects your values, your growth, and your soul's evolution. You stop seeking meaning as if it were hidden treasure and realize that you are the treasure, that meaning is not something to find, but something to express. To become the architect of meaning is to stand tall amid chaos and say, "I will build from this." It is to turn your scars into symbols of strength and your losses into lessons of love. It is to walk through darkness with the quiet confidence that you can always light your own torch. It is to live not as a victim of circumstance, but as a creator of destiny. Every thought becomes a blueprint, every action a brick, every choice a part of the structure of your becoming. Slowly, piece by piece, you build a life that reflects who you truly are. Not a copy of the world, but a creation of your soul. Good luck on your journey of creation, and thank you for having the courage to build meaning where others see none. You are the architect of your own story, and in every moment, you hold the power to shape your life into something sacred, beautiful, and true. In the end, rebuilding yourself is not a single act, but a lifelong awakening. It is the quiet decision to stop running from your pain and start listening to it. To see every loss, every mistake, and every scar as a teacher rather than a curse. You have walked through the ruins of your old self, faced your shadows, embraced the chaos, and learned the sacred strength of solitude. You have stopped seeking to reinvent and instead learned to integrate, to take every broken piece and turn it into part of your wholeness. And now you stand not as who you were, but as who you've become. Wiser, deeper, and unshakably real. Rebuilding yourself means you no longer chase meaning, you create it. You no longer beg the world for validation, you carry your own worth within. Life will still test you, storms will still come, but now you know. Every collapse is a chance to rise again, stronger than before. You have discovered that rebirth is not found in perfection, but in truth. Good luck on your journey of becoming, and thank you for having the courage to rebuild. For in doing so, you remind the world that even from ashes, a soul can bloom again.